right. Hey, if you got a Bible, can you get it out and go to 1 Peter chapter 5. That's where we're going to be today. 1 Peter chapter 5. I'm thankful to be able to share with you today. We are in, this is week 4 of a series called One Another. We are doing this whole summer looking at passages out of the New Testament, sometimes one verse, sometimes many verses that describe how it is you and I ought to live in community with one another. And so we've talked about loving one another, live in harmony with one another. Last week we said teach one another. You took my coffee cup.
I've been thinking about on pianos.
Sorry, I don't have to put on the, okay. I need it later, guys. I was trying to, anyways, love one another, live in harmony with one another, teach one another, it's where we've been. And actually, most of the one another's in the New Testament are like positive commands, do these things. There are some negative ones. In fact, I think it's 2 weeks from today, we'll look at a passage that says, do not lie to one another. Don't be dishonest with one another. So this is kind of what we're doing for the summer, looking at these different one another passages. Today, in 1 Peter chapter 5, I hope you have a Bible. You can go there. We're going to flip a couple different places today, but let me just show you in chapter 5, verse 5, our one another verse. Here's what it says. This is Peter writing. He says this, "Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another." And so today we're going to look at and talk about what does it look like for us to live in relationship with one another, but do it in a way that is humble, with humility. Now let me show you a picture of a man. His name is Nick Wallenda. You guys ever heard of him before? Nick Wallenda. He is a world-class tightrope walker. He is known as the king of the high wire. I think he became most famous about 10 years ago. He actually did a feat. He crossed Niagara Falls on a tightrope. They broadcast it live on TV. There were like 100,000 people who showed up either side of the falls to watch him walk across. They also, I think it was 10 million people that watched him on TV walk across Niagara Falls. Now, this is actually a picture in Chicago. He set up these tight ropes between different buildings and actually went from one building to another. He had no netting, no harness in any way, just freely walked across. Now here's the crazy parts. Between one of the buildings, going from one to another, he actually walked across blindfolded, going from one side to another. Now, I just find that to be crazy, actually, but this is what he did. It's always interesting to me the things that people are really good at and then can make a lot of money doing, and so this is something that he's just amazing at. In fact, his whole family, he's got kids that tightrope across things. Now, what you may not know this about Nick Wallenda. Nick Wallenda is a Christian. He's a follower of Jesus. He's actually pretty outspoken about his Christian faith. And he's got some really interesting things to say, actually, about pride and humility. He knows, actually, that he gets all this attention. He'll do these feats, and all these people show up on TV, will be watching him. And he says that in those moments, he's really tempted towards pride. His heart just kind of turns towards, look at all this attention on me. Look how great I am. And so what he says is that after kind of the media fades away, after the crowds go away, he engages in what he calls a spiritual discipline. I don't know if this is really a spiritual discipline, but a practice that allows him to practice humility. He actually goes down to wherever the crowds were and picks up the trash that's been left behind. He said this, and let me just quote him. He said this, "My purpose is simply to help clean up, actually after myself. The huge crowd left a great deal of trash behind, and I feel compelled to pitch in. Besides, after the inordinate amount of tension I saw and received, I need to keep myself grounded." So here's what he does. 3 hours of cleaning up debris is good for my soul. Humility does not come naturally to me, so if I have to force myself into situations that are humbling, so be it. I know that I need to get down on my hands and knees like everyone else. I do it because it's a way to keep me from tripping. As a follower of Jesus, I see him washing the feet of others. I do it because If I don't serve others, I'll be serving nothing but my ego. If I don't serve others, I'll be serving nothing but my ego. And as I was reading that and thinking about this guy with the spotlight on him all the time, what an incredible testimony actually to say, you know what? I actually just need to stop and place myself lower and go clean up the trash. Now, we're doing this series about one anothering, and it's a sermon series I think that we need as a people, as a faith family, as a church, because what we are doing here, what God is building at Redemption Church, whatever that is, I have no idea. He's building something with us together here at Redemption Church. I know this: Satan will try to destroy, and he will do it through relationships. This is how he destroys people. This is how he destroys churches. There are a number of ways. In fact, as a pastor, the Bible actually says, as a pastor of the church, it's my job to guard the faith, guard theology, sound doctrine, that I would teach and preach and guard what we teach here, from small group leaders, children's ministry, youth, college, that we would teach things that are in line with the Word of God. Satan can attack that way. But the reason why we're doing this series this summer is because there's another way he can attack, and it's just by destroying relationships. And so what does it look like for us to live in this community together with one another? You know, I don't care. I mean this sincerely. I don't care if our church is known for incredible worship. I don't care if our church is known for incredible preaching. I really don't. What I care about is that our church would be known for incredible people who serve one another, care for one another, love one another, support one another. One of the things I love hearing the most, you know, Redemption Church, it just seems like in my time here, it's a very transient church. Like, we're a college town, people come, and some of you have been here for a long time, and yet there's other families, individuals that are here for a couple of years, and they move on somewhere else. I love hearing from a family that was here for a period of time, and now they've moved away, and they found a good, healthy church that they can grow and serve in, but they'll say something along the lines of, man, there's just something different about Redemption Church. There's something different about the people who are there. I love that, because that's what church is, right? It's all about relationships that we're building together. Okay, so let's talk about 1 Peter. In 1 Peter chapter 5, there's actually instruction given to elders, to pastors, about how they would engage in relationship with the flock, with the church, is what we're told here. And then in verse 5, I only gave you the second part of it earlier, but it begins. Let me just kind of read the section here. Verse 5, it says this: "Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to elders." And now he gives a description of what it looks like for us together to interact with one another. He says this: "Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another." This is the command. Humility is something, I want you to catch this, if we're to clothe ourselves with humility towards one another, humility is something that we put on. We have to be intentional about it. I am putting this on. Humility is something that other people will notice. You are wearing it. And humility is something that is for all of you. For all of us, we ought to be clothing ourselves in humility. And then he gives us a reason why we ought to do this. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. God is actually, we're told here, working actively against those who are proud. In other words, God is in opposition to those who are prideful. Reality check for you, okay? You don't want to be in opposition to God. You don't want to be on that side of the equation. So we're told here, clothe yourselves in humility. You want to know why? Because God actively opposes, has set himself up against those who would be prideful. But actually then there's a promise. But he gives grace to the humble. And then he moves on in the very next verse to say this in verse 6. This is how you can go about like clothing yourselves in humility. Now he says it again. "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so at the proper time he may exalt you." What ought we to do? We humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God. Now, here's what I want you to catch. This is so important for today. On the one hand, verse 5, we're told to clothe ourselves in humility. It's a horizontal activity, that there's humility being expressed to each other in relationships. But then we're actually told a big why. Well, because God opposes the proud. So now how are we going to clothe ourselves in humility? It's actually by living humbly before God vertically. So our horizontal relationships are going to be influenced by your vertical relationship with God. So here's what you're going to learn today. We cannot have the horizontal without first getting the vertical right. Right? We cannot have the horizontal without first getting this vertical right. Let me say it this way. Here's kind of the big idea. Humility starts with God and spills over to one another. It's going to start with God, your relationship with God, and it's going to spill over to one another. Now enter my coffee cup. This is actually just the coffee cup that I poured coffee in this morning and drove here to church. It's a Father's Day mug from 2023. Now just imagine with me, though, just for sake of illustration. You ever do this before? You fill your coffee all the way to the brim. It's like all the way full. And then you're walking and you bump into someone. What happens? The coffee spills over on them. Or if you had tea in here, what's going to spill on them? Tea. If you had water in here, what's going to spill on them? Water. Okay? Now, my point is this, just kind of for the sake of illustration. Whatever you have filled up in your relationship with God, approaching God in humility or approaching God in pride, that's what's going to come out in your relationships with others. Humility starts with God, and it spills over to one another. Prideful before God, prideful before others. Humble before God, humble with others. Now, let me show you actually this is like the perfect example. And it comes in Luke chapter 18. Jesus actually tells this parable. It's a parable you may have heard before, Luke chapter 18. I'm just going to read it to you. It's really short. In verse 10, it says this. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Now, we got these 2 guys, and just so we're clear, in Jesus' day, the Pharisee was the one who was respected. The Pharisee was the teacher. He would have been the one to look up to. Now, Jesus has a lot of bad things to say about Pharisees, but as he tells the story, that's people like, okay, this is the good guy, but then the tax collector, that's the bad guy. He's the one who would steal from the people, was known for being corrupt even. So these are the 2 characters in the story that Jesus is telling. And it says this in verse 11. The Pharisee standing by himself. It's actually, the language is like he set himself up on a pedestal where everyone can see him, standing by himself. Prayed thus, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men. Do you see the pride in that? Extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. What pride? And then he says this, I fast twice a week. I give tithes on all that I get. I give 10% back every time I get something. Look at me. Now look at verse 13. But the tax collector standing far off, the idea like he's in the back of the room. He's off by himself. He's not put up on the pedestal. Would not even lift his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified. He was the one in the right, not the Pharisee, rather than the other. Then we get this phrase, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Literally like the same language we saw back in 1 Peter. Now, the point of the parable is, I think, fairly obvious, right? Don't be prideful like the Pharisee, be humble like the tax collector. That's like the point of the story. But actually, what I want to show you is what took place in verse 9, right before this parable was spoken. Luke tells us who this parable was given to. Look at verse 9. He also told this parable to some who, underline this, trusted in themselves that they were righteous. This is the vertical relationship with God. They trusted, look at me, I tithe. Look at me, I fast. Look at me, I'm better than that tax collector. They trusted in themselves for their righteousness and treated others with contempt. Underline that. So on the one hand, we have a vertical problem, trusting in themselves, but it spilled out. How? In contempt, pride for others. So he is speaking specifically to those who have a vertical problem exposed in a horizontal way. So let me throw my point back up there again. Humility starts with God and spills over to one another. The problem was here, but it spills out over there. So if the horizontal is a result of the vertical, you and I, we have to start with God, right? We can't even begin to think about what it looks like to clothe ourselves in humility if we don't first think about what does it look like to live humbly with God, under God. In order to do that, we got to work backwards in these two verses, verse 5 and 6. So start in verse 6. Here's the command again. Humble yourselves. That's the command that is given to us, that we would humble ourselves. This is a Greek imperative. It is a command. Humility, humble yourselves, this command, humility was not a virtue actually in the Greek culture of the day. It would have been looked down upon. It was not celebrated. It was not considered a virtue worth pursuing. Humility wasn't admired. It was looked down upon. People associated humility with weakness. Now today, humility, I don't think it's a virtue that people look down on and say, no, you shouldn't be humble. I think it's something people in general would say, yeah, humility's good. The question is, are we actually stepping into that? Humility is actually the way of Jesus. That's what Jesus taught, is humility. If you were here on Thursday night and we did our Bible study out of the book of Philippians, we looked at Philippians chapter 2, where we see Jesus as our example of humility, that he would leave his throne in heaven. He did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. He emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant, actually, being even obedient in death. This is Jesus. The way of Jesus is one of humility. And we get that example because actually in the first part of Philippians chapter 2, we're told to act in humility towards one another, that we would look out for the interests of others, that we would do nothing out of selfish ambition, but consider others better than ourselves. Humility is the way of Jesus. Okay, let's keep going on our verse here. So we are to humble ourselves. This is the command, therefore. Now look at under the mighty hand of God. The mighty hand. The mighty hand of God is actually used throughout the Old Testament, describes the power of God at work. Let me give you one example. In the book of Exodus, Moses has been called to lead the people out of Egypt. And before he even gets to Egypt to help lead the people out, he's in a conversation with God. And here's what God said to him. Verse 19 of chapter 3. But I know that the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. This appears over and over again. And it's true that Pharaoh would not let the people go without the mighty hand of God showing up, sending plagues. They wouldn't be able to escape without the mighty hand of God separating the Red Sea. Or the mighty hand of God that would provide manna for them to eat while they wandered in the desert, or water to come from the rock. This is the mighty hand of God. And the mighty hand of God is meant to remind us of the power of our God. You ever been in a moment in your life where you experience the mighty hand of God? Let me give you some examples, just simple ones. You ever stand on the edge of the Grand Canyon? Just look out. I don't know how someone doesn't do that and go, wow. The mighty hand of God. Look at this. Or you ever been just at the Oregon coast and you're standing on the beach there and the sun is setting and you just kind of look out over that water and you're like, wow, this is incredible, the mighty hand of God. Or during the summertime when there's no clouds and it's late at night, maybe you're camping and there's no lights around, you sit down, you look up at the stars. Wow, the mighty hands of God. Everyone won't relate to this, but I think about all my children who have been born. That first time when you hold your kid, you're like, wow, the mighty hand of God. There's a baby that wasn't here and now is here. It's crazy. I remember when our oldest was born 14 years ago, Caden. We had a Korean like host student, exchange student that was living in our house. She was in high school and brought home Caden from the hospital, and she holds the baby. And she's like almost weeping. She's like, I've never like God is so real. Like this just made it so real for her. She saw the mighty like hand of God right there in this child. And here's what Peter is telling us. Humble yourself, but you're not just humbling yourself under just anybody. Humble yourself, submit yourself to, surrender yourself under the mighty hands of God. The one who is powerful and active in this world. He is strong and he is mighty. In fact, you could say it this way, it would be foolish to approach God with pride, would it not? The one who is mighty. And so we humble ourselves under God because we recognize that everything I have, I did not earn. It comes from his hands. And then the verse goes on, go back to verse 6. It actually says, humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, so that you would be raised up, lifted up at the proper time, the time that God has decided. Now, the question that I think begs itself that I wrestled with is this: how do I know that I'm humbling myself before God? Is there a test? How can I know if I'm living humbly under God? I actually think there are two ways we can test ourselves. And it comes in the following verses, okay? So go back, let's just kind of build on this verse, okay? Verse 6. Well, let me give you my phrase first. Humility is revealed in how we respond to pressure and to attack. I'm going to show you this. Humility is going to be revealed in our life in how we respond to stress and worry. Humility is going to be seen in how we respond to the attack of the devil, temptation on your life. This is how we're going to know if we are living humbly under God. Now, let me show you. Go back to verse 6. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so at the proper time he may exalt you, comma. So what does it look like to humble? Casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you. That word casting, that we would throw. It's actually throwing something on something or someone else. He's actually using a word in the Greek that literally means to hurl. I'm going to hurl these anxieties onto God. So how is it that one humbles himself? It is demonstrated in you giving your worries, cares, fears, anxiety to God. But what does that even begin to look like? Well, it begins with prayer, taking whatever this is that's causing the anxiety, the worry, the stress, the fear. I'm going to take it to God in prayer. But here's what can happen so easily in a pride-filled Christian life. I prayed about it, and now I will solve it myself. I prayed about it, but instead of hurling it onto Jesus, I just told him about it, and I'm going to carry it myself. No one else is going to carry that. I'm not going to let anyone else in. I'm not going to let God do his thing. Peter's telling us not just to pray about it. He's saying, hurl your worries onto Jesus. Make him responsible for the problem. Set it on his shoulders. He will carry it. Reminds me of when I was in high school and I was a sophomore. And I did not play football. I was a small little guy, but I would go to the football games, my high school football team. My sophomore year, they went all the way to won the state championship, my high school football team. They were led by a guy who actually came to Oregon State University, he was a lineman, he played defensive line. His name was Bill Swancut. You may have heard of him years ago. He was from my high school. This is big old man. Now, he would play football. He was a beast. But you know what the other job he had on the team? He was the punt returner. Not because he was inherently fast. He wasn't fast at all. Because he would catch that ball and start running down the field, and he would literally carry like the entire team, the opposing team, on his back as he's like rumbling down the field. That's how strong he is. Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. He's strong enough that when you throw your worries, your cares on him, he can carry it. Here's what pride does. Says this: I'll take care of it. I'll handle that. Humility says, I'll give it to God, the only one who has the mighty hands. The opposite of casting, by the way, hurling, is keeping. And that keeping manifests itself in worry. And worry is really a form of pride, assuming the mantle of control instead of trusting your problems to God. So your humility is demonstrating your trust, surrender, and releasing your cares to him. It's not just that he has a mighty hand. You catch the end of this? Because he cares for you. Oh, so important. It's not just that he's strong. It's also that he loves you and he cares about you. He's powerful, but he cares. This is the person you give your anxieties to. And this isn't an excuse. When we say hurl it onto him, it's not an excuse to do nothing. There's a responsibility on our parts. Because when we hurl our problems onto God, they become his problem. He may ask you to do something about it, to take action. But the weight of solving your problem is not on you, it's put on God. You know how you'll know if you're not really giving it to God? You'll lie awake at night, unable to sleep, worrying about it. That's how you'll know. You'll be paralyzed with indecision. That's how you'll know. You'll be preoccupied with controlling everything. That's how you'll know. This is hard. So hard. Because don't we want to control everything? Don't we just find ourselves worrying about every outcome that could take place in this decision? It's hard. Here's what I've started to do. You can pray about it, and here's just a line you can say. And God, I trust you with this. Just God, I trust you with this. I don't trust myself with it. God, I trust you with it. It's got to be you. Okay, so humility before God is revealed in how we respond to pressure, right? But also to attack. And so we can evaluate our life. How do I respond to pressure? That's how I know if I'm living humbly under God, but also to attack. Look at verse 8. Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. So let's start there. Be sober-minded. Know this, that you can't mess around with the attack of Satan. Maybe the language would be, don't be drunk on yourself. Humility recognizes, I'm not above temptation. Pride says, I'm fine. It's no big deal. I got this. In fact, the next line there says, be watchful. Stay alert. Don't let your guard down. And then verse 9 says, underline this, resist him. Humility is seen in actively deciding to resist the devil, resist temptation. You know, those who find themselves deeply trapped by sin, I bet can find pride sprinkled in all throughout it. I didn't need accountability for that. I will just do better next time. I can be in this situation, nothing will happen. But we're told resist him. Humility before God is revealed in how we respond to pressure. Yes, the worries and stresses of life, but it's also in how we respond to the attack of Satan. Pride is being indifferent towards sin. Pride is certainly being indulgent with sin, thinking it won't hurt, it won't come back to get us. But we're told here, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, the one, isn't it interesting? Earlier, God could be opposing the proud, right? But we're told, no, walk in humility because the real enemy, the real one who opposes you is the devil. And he prowls like a roaring lion seeking to devour. Devour, it has a sense of like to gulp down. Emphasizing really the final objective, Satan's desire is not to wound you, but to destroy you. You're done. You know, Peter, he didn't have the opportunity like you and I would to go see a lion at a zoo. My kids love going and seeing the lion at the zoo. You know what Peter's idea of a lion was? The Roman Colosseum, when they would let the lion loose and would just tear people limb from limb. You see, this is what Peter's like. No, you be careful here. Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. Don't think you're above it. Why? Because the lion who is ready to devour is waiting to jump on you. So what do? Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Resist him. Humility is demonstrated in how we respond to the attack. So we start with humility before God, and we can ask ourselves those two questions. How am I responding to pressure? How am I responding to the attack? This is how you'll know, actually. Am I living humbly under God? And now we turn the corner. And we say this, then how do we begin to solve the horizontal stuff? Because now we're evaluating the vertical, right? Now let's go back to the horizontal, back to verse 5. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another. And then he quotes Proverbs chapter 3, verse 34. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So we already said it. Pride puts you up against God. God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Did you know? So it's a quote of Proverbs, but this phrase actually appears one other time in the New Testament. Not by Peter, but actually by James, the half-brother of Jesus. He writes the exact same thing in his book. And it's really interesting to me because, again, I'll show you this, that James says, hey, look, you want to solve the horizontal thing, we got to fix the vertical. But he sheds light on the horizontal problem. Let me show you. James chapter 4. James chapter 4, famous passage. We've preached on it here before. Verse 1, what causes quarrels? What causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? Like, hey, you know what? Why do people fight? Why do people quarrel? It's because of the selfishness, the pride that is inside of you. Verse 2, you desire, you do not have, so you actually murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and you quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. He's like, the reason why is because your pride is filled up. You think you can do it all yourself, and you're hurting one another. Then he begins to describe what that looks like. It's like you're an adulterous people. Friendship with the world is enmity towards God. But then he comes in verse 6, and we see that same phrase quoted again. But he gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. What's the response to the horizontal fighting? Hey, remember this. God opposes the proud. He gives grace to the humble. And then verse 7, he says this, submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Because again, it's the same thing. The answer is get the vertical right. And then we'll begin to see the horizontal take place. But here's something we learn about the horizontal, and this is so important. I want you to grab onto this, okay? Grab onto this. Pride is quietly wrecking what you're trying to build. Pride is quietly wrecking. What causes fights and quarrels among you? It's the pride in your hearts. And it is quietly doing it behind the scenes. And this is true in the church, certainly, and it's true in your family. It's true in your marriage. It's true in your relationship with your kids, and it's true in relationship with your parents. Pride is quietly wrecking what you're trying to build. Man, if you were here this past fall, then I preached a sermon. I think half the sermon was telling the story of the saga of the rats in my house last summer. You can go listen to the sermon, but long story short, last summer we had an invasion of rats under my house. Not pretty, guys. Caused a lot of heartache. We didn't know they were there until it was too late. They just wreaked havoc on my house. We got on vacation, came back. They had chewed through like a plastic water line going to my dishwasher. Water like floods my whole kitchen, pulling up the floor. They punched a hole in the drywall, made a mess actually of the insulation under my house. They've been like living like nests under there. It's so nasty. They actually chewed through the wire that controls my sprinkler system. I've yet to fix that. So it's just a mess completely. The results showed up in like mid-August after we'd be gone on vacation, but they had been there like for a long time before that. They were just quietly destroying. Did not know. And this is what pride will do to your relationships. If you do not destroy the pride, the pride will destroy your relationships. It'll destroy a church. It'll destroy a marriage. It'll destroy family dynamics. It always will, every single time. So what do? Well, we submit ourselves to God. That's what we're told. Get this right. Now we go back to verse 5, okay? Because we've really set the stage here now, just to wrap up with this. The command is, clothe yourselves in humility. And that phrase is powerful, right? It suggests the intentionality. You don't accidentally get dressed. The visibility, what you wear, people are going to see. The preparation even, you show up, you plan for this. I'm going to be humble. Now here's what I want to do to kind of wrap this thing up. We spent all our time talking about the vertical, and we're going to spend about this much time talking about the horizontal. Because if we don't get this right, you're not going to have any chance here. But let me just give you kind of 4 expressions of relational humility. They come straight from Scripture, okay? What does this humility look like horizontally to clothe ourselves? 1, listen before speaking. This is humility. James 1:19 says, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak. Humility says, you matter. I want to understand what you're saying. What does it look like horizontally to clothe ourselves with humility? We just simply, this is so good for you. Just listen before you speak. Number 2, admit when you're wrong. Pride has a way of needing to defend itself, explain itself, shift blame. Humility confesses and seeks restoration. Clothe yourself with humility. Number 3, value others above yourself. Philippians 2:3, in humility, count others more significant than yourselves. Put yourself in a place to serve, to get down under people, to serve them. Then lastly, don't need to be noticed. Humility is not about becoming invisible. It's about not needing the spotlight to feel secure. And sometimes the only way we feel secure is if people recognize us, if the attention is put on me. Now, each of these, they're intentional, like visible, require work on your part. Clothe yourselves with humility. So the question I want to leave us with is this: which of these clothings do I need to put on this week? Maybe it's a relationship with a spouse. Maybe it's with a church member. Maybe it's in the workplace. Maybe it's with a child, a parent. Maybe you need to work on listening before you speak. I'm just going to be silent and hear and understand. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to be curious. Maybe you need to actually go approach someone, just admit, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I hurt you. I sinned. It's not right. Maybe you just got to start valuing others above yourself. You've been just kind of living in this place of, I'm the important one. I'm in charge. We got to place ourselves under. Or maybe you've just been seeking the spotlight. You have to choose to say, I'm going to put myself in a place where I don't need to be noticed. But remember, it all starts with God, and it spills over to others. Came across an article about a man. His name is Alex Haley. He's author of the book Roots, pretty famous book. But he has a picture in his office. I don't think it's this exact picture, but let me throw it on the screen. It's a turtle sitting on top of a fence. You guys ever seen this illustration before? And the picture's there, actually. He has it up in his office, and it's to remind him of like this lesson that he learned a long time ago. If you see a turtle on a fence post, you know he had some help getting there, right? That's the whole point. If you see a turtle on a fence post, you know he had some help getting there. And in an interview, here's what Alex Haley said. Anytime I start thinking, wow, isn't this marvelous what I've done? I look at the picture and remember how this turtle, me, got up on that post. See, this is it, guys. How do we begin to practice humility with one another? We recognize that our God sent his son Jesus to die in our place on the cross, us the undeserving ones. He was buried and he rose again so that one day we might be exalted, raised up, and you don't deserve it and could never do it yourself. So sometimes we just got to step back and say, man, we see a turtle on a fence post. It didn't get there on its own. Whatever good things are happening in my life, wherever I find myself, listen, it's not because of me. Because God has done something by his mighty hands. And it's that mighty hand that I begin to trust. In the midst of anxiety and fighting the attack of Satan, in both those places I trust God. And then here's what happens. It's so natural. It just overflows. It spills out in humility towards one another. So this week, you choose. Live humbly before God and clothe yourselves with humility towards one another. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you, God, that you are a good God, a strong God, a God with a mighty hand, a God who delivers. Delivered by sending your son, Jesus, to conquer sin and death on my behalf because you care for me, because you love me. And God, I pray that we would, as a church, that we would live humbly under you, in full submission and surrender to you. God, teach us what it means and looks like on a daily basis to cast our anxieties on you and to resist the devil, be sober-minded. God, teach us what that looks like. I pray we would respond in humility to you. And then, God, I pray that it would overflow in our relationships with one another, relationships with our families. God, that we would live humbly together. So God, teach us to clothe ourselves in humility. God, it's our desire to be a church where we one another correctly in a way that gives you glory, but is also for our good. So God, thank you for this time. I pray as we respond in worship, God, that we would sing as one church family humbly before you. Praise in your name, Jesus. Amen. We're going to end our service singing these last two songs together. We're going to have a couple people up here, part of our prayer team, that would love to pray for you. And so here's what I want you to do. We do this every week during these last two songs. If you need prayer, maybe you're like, man, I've just been struggling to live humbly. Maybe it's like, man, there's anxiety that I have not been casting. There's temptation I have not been fighting. They'd love to pray for you, so I'd invite you to come up here, and our prayer team would love to pray for you. But also, we started a tradition. We have this big board up here. Every one of these light bulbs represents somebody who has chosen to follow Jesus. And maybe that's you today. Maybe earlier this week you chose to follow Jesus, or right here in this moment you're like, man, I have not ever in my life humbly submitted myself to him, believing that Jesus died on the cross, he was buried and rose again. I'm still stuck in my sin. I want to invite you to come up during these last two songs. Our prayer team love to talk with you, pray for you, but then you have the chance, you can screw in a light bulb representing moving from darkness to light, that you have been made new. I know it takes courage. All right, if we can't be courageous here, we'll never be courageous out there. And so I just want to invite you to say as we sing, we want to celebrate with you and that decision that you would make. All right, would you stand and let's sing these last two songs together.